The additional cost-saving measure introduced by the federal government on Wednesday this week is aimed at curbing leakages and ensuring efficiency in the management of government resources. Now, the approval by President Muhammadu Buhari is to instill financial discipline and prudence, particularly in the area of official travels. For instance, all public-funded travels, both local and foreign, are now required to be strictly for official purposes, backed with documentary evidence. In addition, all foreign travels must now be for very essential statutory engagements that are beneficial to the interest of the country. And except with the express approval of Mr. President, ministers, permanent secretaries, chairmen of ministerial departments, chief executive officers and directors are restricted to not more than 2 foreign travels in a quarter. Also, a minister is at the head, also when a minister is at the head of an official delegation, the size of such a delegation shall not exceed 4, including the relevant director, schedule officer, and 1 aide of the minister. Now, every other delegation below ministerial level shall be restricted to a maximum of 3. Now, these measures and others form the basis of our discussion on Nigeria today. How much does this help? What else may be done to significantly reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria? Well, answers to these and more on the program. Welcome. I am Anne Jibuno. In the studio with me to discuss reducing cost of governance is Niyi Akinseju. He's the chairman, Buhari Media Organization. You're welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. My pleasure.
And we also have Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good evening, Nigerians.
Now, I'll start with you, Niyi Akinseju. Let's look at the financial implication of, or rather the implication of financial discipline in the terms of government spending. What has been the impact of this?
The very obvious impact is high recurrent expenditure, as reflected in our annual budgets. Of course, high recurrent expenditure as a percentage of our national budget had become a major headache. So over time, successive governments had tried to attend to it, to redress it, as it were, because that become a major fiscal challenge. One, you recall that at a point in time, the recurrent aspect of our national budget was as high as 85%. It was just in the last 3-4 years that the government of President Muhammadu Buhari was able to reduce it to 70%. But again, in the 2020 budget that is being debated at the National Assembly now, you're talking of recurrent going to as high as 76%. So what it means is that resources that are meant to be diverted, to be allocated or targeted at development, at infrastructural facilities and all that will be to the direct benefit of Nigerians, being cornered more or less by the public service. Because if you are talking about recurrent, you are mainly talking about those who are employed in the public service or those who are drafted to do one or two things in the public service. In this matter that we're talking about, we're talking particularly about overheads. In the 2020 budgets, as it were, budget estimate as it were, the overheads in that budget is more than 460 billion naira. Now, if you are talking 460 billion naira, compare it, or rather, that's an aggregate of the capital expenditure allocated to Works and Housing Ministry, Education, Agriculture and Rural Development, and I think Aviation. So you are looking at 4 ministries, allocation of capital capital allocation for 4 ministries entirely that would now go to just service overheads. And what does overhead capture? Travels and training, you know. So I think this is a major leap. Of course, it's not. It's just a continuation of what the government has been doing, but it's a major leap. It's important that it gets to a point in time, especially when there's a fiscal challenge of regarding revenue use and generation, you know, in the country.
Now, Jide Ojo, let's look at this. Do you agree with the submission that this high cost of governance is also responsible for the? I know he has mentioned some issues in the fact that it impacts what we spend on our budget. Do you also agree with the submission that it's also responsible for high debt servicing?
Well, not necessarily. Debt servicing is on its own, and the recurrent is on its own.
Now, apart from what he said.
But first and foremost, I want to commend President Muhammadu Buhari for taking the bull by the horn. I know he will not be. The bureaucrats will not be happy for this. It's like a big blow to them, because a lot of them make a lot of resources through travels. Extra codes that are collected during travels is the major reason why there's jostling to travel. It's not so much. I mean, we've seen situations in the past where Nigerian delegations to events, international meets and all of that, they will not even pay attention at the conference or seminar or workshop. You see them at the shopping malls because the extra codes. And then they will go 2-3 days ahead and then come back. They will be the first to arrive and the last to leave because of extra codes. And while I'm appreciating the president, it's because this is a continuation of what was started by his administration in November of 2015, when the then Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, set up efficiency unit in the ministry to also look at how to cut down, significantly recurrent expenditure. I don't know how much success was recorded under her watch before she resigned, and whether there have been some continuation after she left under the controversial circumstance she did. But I recall that the efficiency unit, which was called E-Unit, under our watch, was aimed at reducing the cost of governance. Now, I said the civil servants will not be happy, because this is what they use to augment their salaries. And that's why you see it's a fight to finish in many ministries, departments, and agencies about who to travel and where to travel to because of extra costs. Now, this will not go down well with them. But the reality that stares us in the face is that there is dwindling income to the government. And when you have such situation, in this 2020 budget, we are borrowing 2.18 trillion. We are borrowing to augment, because the entire revenue projection of the government is about 8 trillion out of 10.33 trillion. So you are going to borrow as much as over 2 trillion. If you don't spend this, and yesterday there was a breakdown of our national debt portfolio. It's very staggering. I think we are 24 trillion in indebtedness. And coming to what you said earlier about debt servicing, in this 2020 budget, we are servicing our debt with a staggering sum of 2.45 trillion. Servicing, not paying. So if this shows that we do not have sufficient resources, so if you leave this overhead to be as bogus as it is for people to just, even if you are traveling and the impact of that traveling is born, is made to drive productivity, efficiency. When you come back, the knowledge you bring, you find out, I maintain that many a time when people just to travel, they are not even traveling because they want their capacity to be built. They are not paying much attention. It's just because of that testacle. Now the president has
not
said,
in all cases.
no, maybe not in all cases, but when you look at the quantum of resources over time, before this circular came into being, and the quantum of productivity in government, you will find that it is not commensurate.
All right, now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Apart from what we've already we revealed in our introduction, state officials below ministers, permanent secretaries, special advisors, senior special assistants to the president, chairman of extra ministerial departments, and chief executive officers will henceforth fly economy class. How do we quantify what we are going to save? What measure of costs have we saved?
We can link that to the efficiency unit they talked about. In the figures for 2018, from the activities of the efficiency unit, talked of about 60-something billion naira savings. This philosophy had been introduced indirectly through the efficiency unit, but now it has a wider coverage because it covers the higher echelon of government. So if you now say that only officers from the status of SSA and above will be qualified for business class, you are saving so much. Before, the whole idea is that anybody who is on government delegation to anywhere is business class. It's a show of money, it's a show of Nigeria's resources. But this is properly streamlined, and it's part of the fiscal discipline that I personally encourage, And what is even more striking is the arrival dates. No longer will ESTA code be paid for dates of arrival and dates of departure. So much that you only be paid for the participation days. Okay. Now, some people have a way, like you noted, of going earlier, before 2 or 3 days before the events, and would stay back 2-3 days after the event, and would take ESTA code for all that. Now, when you now say, if you like, you can go 3 or 4 days before. Nobody is responsible for you. The government will only be responsible for the particular days of the events. That's saving so much money. And the budgetary aspect of it is even more impressive, because this has your traveling plans must be consolidated and presented to the office of the SGF or HOS for approval from the beginning of the year. So it is a budgetary process by itself. I think it's highly commendable in terms of the planning and programming.
Okay, now Jide Ojo, let's look at some concerns raised by, in some quarters about the number of those that will be flying business class. Do you think there is any cause for any alarm? I mean, people have to still fly business class as is done elsewhere on this.
You cannot please the entire country or entire community of civil servants. People will raise their eyebrow. I really feel, in all honesty, the president himself needs to look inward. 3.3 billion naira meant for travel between him and the vice president is also on the high side. And I think he should lead the pack by making sure that he also practices what he's preaching. It should not just leave it to civil servant ministers, because if you look at that sum, over 2 billion for the president for his travel, or 1-point-something billion for the vice president's travel, foreign travel for that matter, I think they can also prune down that substantially. We have infrastructural deficit that is crying for attention, and over the years, it is the overheads that are drawn down 100%. The salaries and wages are drawn down 100%. The challenge of implementing successive budget has always been capital. That is the sacrificial lamb. Every year, the capital does not get fully released. And that's why it is important for the president to lead the pack, lead by example, and say, look, I'm also cutting down my external travels. Yes, I have to travel, but I will only also go to those ones that needs my primary attention. Otherwise,
and as it's done,
maybe he will send ministers, maybe he will send vice president, but because the reality that stares us in the face is that the country is hemorrhaging.
Right.
We do not have sufficient resources, so even we can cut down. Ministers may not even need more than 2-3, but it's a good start.
Yes.
And I commend him that he has taken the gauntlet. Like I said earlier on, this will not even endear him to many people in public service, because it's a bold
step, and it's the first time this has been done in the
country. But full implementation is what is needful. Because he has said that now the Auditor General needs to also keep his eye to ensure that this is fully implemented.
Okay, we will talk about that later. Well, this is Nigeria Today, and we're taking a look at reducing cost of governance. Let's pause here for a break. When we return, our discussion will continue. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Nigeria Today on NTA News 24, and we're discussing reducing cost of governance. And of course, Jide Ojo and Nia Kimsiju remain with us. Now, before we went on that break, we were looking at the nitty-gritty of the issues. Let's talk about the subnationals and maybe the parliament. How can they help, toe the line of the president?
Yeah, Jide talked about the president. I being one of the lookouts, for the presidency, would tell you that the president is serious about cutting, his own overheads, as it were. Yes, that figure is there, but the president is conscious, about managing resources for effect. Don't forget that the president, at the beginning of his term, declared publicly with his vice president that he will be saving, he will be volunteering 50% of his salaries and emoluments, annually. It shows, and we are talking of 2015, and he's still, committed to that even up till now. That's one. Then two, I think at the level of the National Assembly, especially, there should be a consensus approach to reducing cost of running the assembly. Over the years, consistently over the past 3 years, the minimum we've had for running the National Assembly is 125 billion. At the point in time, it was as high as 150 billion. It was in 2018 thereabout that they cut it to 125 billion because of public outcry. I think that is huge. I think even structurally, the National Assembly needs to be reduced. And philosophically, I believe the work of the National Assembly, members of the National Assembly, should be on part-time basis. If we are declaring an emergency of sorts, given the paucity of fund, there should be that feel of patriotism, from the National Assembly. Talking about the subnational, the states now, governors collect constituency allowance too. It is peculiar, it is strange. It is only in Nigeria. You are talking of constituency allowance, you are talking of security votes that are not accounted for, and sundry charges, sundry votes that are not accounted for. The governors by themselves will also free up, and we expect Nigerians not to just look at Abuja alone, their backyard, their governors. They should start questioning them, take them to account for whatever they are spending in the country. It's savings, bit savings from all this from all the strata of government that will add up something that we can use to do some other things, especially for our capital formation, as it were.
Okay, let's look at other areas that we can save cost and save money. Jide, what do you think? What other areas, apart from the ones we have mentioned?
Well, there are quite a number of other areas that I think we ought to have advanced our mind to. I still go back to the national level. Mr. President has no business appointing 43 ministers. There are, constitutionally, the constitution says he should appoint one from each state. If he had stuck to that, we will have had maximum of 37, because the one for geopolitical zone balancing will have saved us a lot. But maybe because I'm not a politician, he has his own reasons why. I said 43 is advisedly, because I know 42 were cleared by the National Assembly, but he himself, being Minister of Petroleum Resources, is the 43rd person. But I think having this at the back of his mind, he should have known that this will exponentially increase the cost of running government. But like I said, I'm not a politician. He possibly was trying to do some political balancing and all of that, and because a lot of people worked for his re-election, he needed to get them settled. But having said that, other areas by which I think we could save cost is also reducing the number of aides that are appointed either by ministers or heads of ministries, departments, and agencies. Where should somebody have SSA, SA, I don't know, there is a SA, you can have one SA media, SA publicity, SA social media. We don't need all of these people. You can have one person, SA media, doing social media, doing traditional media. You don't need to, and that is why I'm challenging Mr. President. It's good to call the subnationals to order, but there's an adage in my part of the world that says it is the frontals that the back one used to pace.
Now he has led with
That's
this.
why I'm saying we are discussing areas he could also do something similar. Because if he also reduces the number of essays, like all these essay social media, essay publicity, essay photographer, essay this, essay that, if you have all of this restricted, 5, 10 maximum, you save a lot of recurrent expenditure. Then you also go under your minister. You don't need 10, 15 aides to run your ministry, because the bureaucrats are there. And when you just bring people, you call them consultant, call them all manner of things, you pay them very fantastic and bogus allowances and salaries. These are part of the reason why we have a very huge overhead. So we can cut down the number of aides that are appointable by any of the ministers.
Now let's look at let's look at the issue of implementation. We've had we have a lot of beautiful laws and rules. How do we ensure that this does not go the way the others have gone? Very briefly, please.
Yeah, I talked about the basis for this implementation, and it has a budgetary undertone, which makes it more organized. It is not just on a per issue template. It is on an annual template. MDAs are expected to draw up their travel plans at the beginning of the year and submit to the HOS or the SGF for approval. When it is approved, this is what would be aligned. It means that in the next budgetary cycle, it will be included in the budget.
Okay.
So it's something you can reference easily.
Okay, Jide Ojo, let's look at the areas where these saved funds could be deployed.
Infrastructure. And seriously speaking, I went around some of the states in Nigeria a couple of weeks back, and I'm ashamed. I just came back from another travel yesterday. If you see the state of infrastructural decay that we experience at the subnational level, now the Minister of Works and Housing said states should not repair roads belonging to federal government because they will not be reimbursed. if I came back from Oyo State yesterday, if you know Ibadan very well, the Iwo Road axis, if you see the kind of hold up that is happening at that axis, all because some of the fair portion of that, and that road belongs to federal government. So you will find out that even the minister says that the budget, the envelope that is being given to him in 2020 budget is just going to go into payment of previous works done by contractors. So we still need a lot of resources to fix the infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals, the schools, the stadia, and several other, including the electricity generation, because we cannot unlock the potentials of this country. We cannot resolve the unemployment and poverty of this country without fixing the electricity issue.
All right, thank you very much. We are completely out of time. Well, Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Nia Kinsiju, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization. We appreciate your insight today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
And to you, our esteemed viewer, we thank you for always staying tuned to the program. Do join us again, same time, same station at 7:30 p.m. in the week. Also catch other episodes on YouTube. Address www.youtube.com/NTNews24.